Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well. And as you all know that the syllabus for the A-level economics in 2023 has undergone significant changes as it does every few years. And since now some topics are no longer part of AS, as it has been shifted to A2, and a few topics from A2 has been moved to AS, this has kind of led to confusion amongst the students regarding which MCQs they should be doing and which MCQs they shouldn't be doing, right? They shouldn't be attempting. And hence that is why I decided to make this video to hopefully clear some things up for you guys so that you can only test the concepts that you are expected to know in the AS, right? So guys, be sure to stick around till the end of the video and feel free to ask any further questions in the comments down below. Okay guys, now first we're going to be starting with the changes in microeconomics. Now as far as microeconomics is concerned, there has been some few changes that you need to know, such as the topic of money that included the functions and the characteristics of money. This has been moved to A2. Previously, MCQs on characteristics and functions of money were tested. Now they are not likely to be tested since they have been moved to A2. Again, the concept of barter system has been removed from the syllabus. Initially, it was part of your AS syllabus, but now you don't need to know that. However, I would still suggest that some certain basics you should be knowing as an econ student, even if they are not going to test you an MCQ on barter system. Again, the concepts of deposits, checks, near money, liquidity, all of this was initially part of the AS syllabus on a very basic level, and they were covered under the chapter of money. They have been also moved to A2 along with the functions and the characteristics of money. Now this covers the chapter of money and what under money what has been moved to A2. Now let's move on to some another changes that are also quite significant, and they include such as transitional economies. We have seen a lot of MCQs before 2022, and up till 2022 basically, that included transitional economies and the issues of transition, where economies transition from planned economies to market economies and what sort of issues arise. So they also have been removed from the AS syllabus, and now they are not going to possibly test MCQs on transitional economies. So if you're practicing MCQs for your May June 23 attempt, you can leave such MCQs with certainty. Now moving on to the third topic that has had certain changes, and that is government intervention. And under government intervention, we see two significant changes that have been made. Initially, what we've seen is that the topic of nationalization and privatization was part of your AS syllabus, covered under government intervention in AS, which has now been moved to A2. Another very important change that has been made is the concept of buffer stock schemes, which was not in AS before but now has been added to AS. So if you're practicing MCQs and you're practicing MCQs from 2022 and prior to 2022 going backwards, and you see MCQs related to nationalization and privatization, then you can leave them. Another thing is that since they have included buffer stock schemes, so you need to know the concepts of buffer stock schemes, because MCQs related to buffer stock schemes can be tested in this year in the May June 23 attempt that you guys are giving. So there's something that you need to practice, and you need to know the concept of buffer stock schemes, so because this is newly introduced in the AS syllabus. Another very important thing is that they have included an entire new section in the AS syllabus, that is section 3.3, which has been added to the AS syllabus, which was never part of AS before. It was part of A2. It still is, a certain component is still part of A2 as well, but a certain component has also been moved to the AS syllabus because the examiners want you to know the concept of income and wealth inequality, because it is related to policies, and a lot of it is also related to your macro as well. However, it's sort of included in your under your microeconomic syllabus in your AS. Now, what do you need to know as far as income and wealth inequality is concerned? So first of all, examiners want you to know that you should be knowing the difference between income as a flow concept and wealth as a stock concept. So as far as your preparation is concerned, make sure that you know what income is, what is the difference between income, and what is the difference between wealth, because the two are different in terms of one being a flow concept, the other being a stock concept. Secondly, they want you to know that why are differences arising between the rich and the poor, the concept of relative poverty, and what are these differences? Why do these differences arise? Why is it that income and wealth inequality exists? So you need to know the reasons why income and wealth inequality exists, and what are the reasons for those differences between the rich and the poor. And why is this, this difference sort of widening the income and wealth gap? Okay. Another thing that you also need to know as an AS student, and for your practice, is that you need to know the concept of Gini coefficient. Now you know that Gini coefficient is used to measure income and wealth inequality, so you need to know the basic concept of Gini coefficient, that how Gini coefficient is used to measure income and wealth inequality, what does it tells, who introduced it, and how it can be used by economists to sort of show which countries are suffering from more income inequality or less income inequality. However, remember that the calculations or the workings are not required. As in, MCQs that will be tested on Gini coefficient will not ask you to calculate the value of it, right? So no numerical MCQs could be tested with respect to the Gini coefficient, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay. Another thing under this subsection that you need to know is that you need to know what are the policies that could be used to redistribute income and wealth, such as, how could the government sort of come up with policies to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor? How could the government come up with policies to reduce the disparity between the rich and the poor? How could they redistribute incomes more equally from the rich to the poor? Such as through the implementation of minimum wages, the concept of transfer payments could be used, progressive income taxes could be used, and the state provision of essential goods and services could be used, right? So you need to know these things because because this is the first time they're going to be testing MCQs on it. So as far as the May June 23 attempt is concerned, so you guys need to know that you guys need to know the policies sort of that are used to redistribute income and wealth, and the concepts behind it, because MCQs could possibly come in your AS May June 23 exams. Okay guys, now moving on to macro, there have been some significant changes that have taken place in the A-level syllabus, and as far as AS is concerned, they have introduced a new subsection, that is 4.1 in the AS syllabus, with the name of National Income Statistics. Now, being AS students who are going to be giving the MCQ papers in the coming week, what you need to know for MCQs is that you need to know, as far as this chapter is concerned, what does national income means. You also need to know why are we calculating the national income statistics and the values of national income, as in what sort of purpose it is. Analysis sort of MCQs could come where they could sort of give answer options asking you about the purpose of national income statistics. You should also know the difference between GDP, GNI, and net national income. Now this is very important, guys. You should be knowing the difference between these three. You should also be knowing the three methods of calculating GDP that are used, such as the income method, output method, and the expenditure method. MCQs could be tested on that based on either calculation MCQs or analysis MCQs as well, or maybe evaluation MCQs as well. Now, you should also be knowing the difference between GDP and GNI, that is measured at market prices and at factor cost, which is also known as basic prices. So what is GDP and GNI measured at market prices and factor cost, and how we sort of convert the GDP and GNI that is measured from, let's say, factor cost to either converting it to market price and then converting the GDP from, let's say, market price to factor cost, right? Such MCQs could be tested where you could be asked to convert GDP that is calculated based on the market price. The value of the GDP is based on market price, and then you could be asked to convert it at factor cost, right? You could also be asked to convert the GDP to GNI, and you could be asked to convert the GNI to ultimately to net national income, that is the NNI. So you should know the formulas for these, which is very, very important. Okay, guys. Now, guys, another section, that is subsection 4.2, was introduced under the macroeconomic heading, that is known as circular flow of income. This has been introduced this year under the AS syllabus. So what do you need to know for MCQs is that you need to know the basic concept of circular flow of income. They could test they could test you in MCQs regarding the concept of circular flow. They could also test you about what an open or a closed economy is, so you need to know the concepts for that. You should also know what are injections, what are the different sorts or types of injections, and what are different types of leakages, and what impact could injections and leakages have on the circular flow of income. You guys should also know from an MCQ perspective that what is the difference between equilibrium and disequilibrium national income. When could national income be in equilibrium or when it could be in disequilibrium? Like, for example, national income must be, or it will be in equilibrium when the level of injections equal the level of leakages for an economy to be sort of said or called under equilibrium, right? So this topic has been introduced this year, and I am definitely expecting MCQs to come on circular flow of income. Another significant change that was made in the AS syllabus was that they introduced a chapter of unemployment from A2. So they sort of, some parts of unemployment were shifted from A2 to AS, although the remaining parts of unemployment still is there in the A2 syllabus as well. But yeah, unemployment was introduced. So what do we need to know for the AS MCQs is, for practicing the AS MCQs is that we need to sort of be aware of what does the unemployment mean. So questions like this, a definition could come. What does the labor force means? What are the people who are not part of the labor force? What are the people who are part of the labor force? What do you mean by the economically active and the inactive population? What is the labor force participation rate? All these questions could come based on your knowledge and understanding of unemployment. And questions like, how do you sort of measure unemployment? What are the two types of measures for unemployment, such as the claimant count measure and the labor force survey measure? You should also be aware of the difficulties for the measuring unemployment using both these methods. Questions could come, they could give you some sort of a scenario asking you what sort of an unemployment is this, right? And you should be aware of the types of unemployment, like frictional, structural, cyclical, seasonal, technological. And since you have already given your P2 exam, it's already assumed that you're sort of well aware of these. Consequences of unemployment is also important. Analysis questions, analysis MCQs could be part of ask you regarding the consequences of unemployment, and they could give you a scenario saying unemployment, some sort of an unemployment is in occurring in an economy, and then what impact will that have, let's say, on price level or GDP or growth or inflation, on your export sector, on your subsequent exchange rate, stuff like that. Yeah. So another thing that is very, very important is, and these sort of MCQs is where critical thinking really takes place, is where you should be aware of what is the difference between the level of unemployment versus what is the rate of unemployment. Now, since this is just a video on the syllabus changes, so I'm not going to be teaching here at the moment. I'm not going to be, it's not an explanatory video, but I'll quickly run through what the difference is. So, I'm assuming that you guys are aware of, but the level of unemployment it refers to the total number of workers who are unemployed. So, irrespective, it just refers to what is the size of the people, or the total number of workers, the actual total number of workers who are without jobs. While the unemployment rate is basically the percentage of those people who are without jobs, of the people who are unemployed, as a percentage of the labor force. So the unemployment rate is basically unemployment, the number of workers that are unemployed divided by the labor force times 100, right? It's because it's a percentage. Now, but you need to understand that they both are different. Why? Because the level of unemployment is referring to the number of people who are unemployed, versus the unemployment rate is the proportion of the out of the labor force, how many people are unemployed. So it's referring to the percentage of people who are unemployed out of the labor force. So at times what happens is that even if your unemployment rate is increasing, that is the number of people who are unemployed without jobs is increasing, but your unemployment rate may fall, right? And why could that happen? It could happen because your labor force is increasing by a greater percentage, because level of unemployment and the rate of unemployment may move in different directions. So if your labor force is increasing by a greater percentage, then the level of unemployment, or the number of people who are unemployed, then even though your level of unemployment went up, or the number of people who were unemployed since the last year went up, but the unemployment rate may still fall. So questions like these could happen, where they could ask you, maybe they could give you a table saying that the number of people who were unemployed went up from 2021 to 2022, but then they could give you that the labor force increased by a greater percentage, and what could be concluded from the data or the graph. And a lot of students will misinterpret it, saying that the unemployment rate is also rising, but the fact is that over here the unemployment rate is falling because the labor force is increasing by a greater percentage, right? So questions like these, which involves your critical thinking and evaluation, careful assessment has to be made for such MCQs. So you should be aware of what the level of unemployment and what the rate of unemployment is. The best thing that you can do right now is, since it's a YouTube video, you could probably pause it and then write all my words down, what I just said. Okay, guys. So some another changes that have been made to the AS syllabus are in the chapter of international trade. And what we need to know as students for AS is that you will find MCQs based on these topics that have existed before the March 2023 exams, and they have been removed from the syllabus now. So topics like free trade area, custom unions, monetary unions, full economic unions, trade creation and trade divergence, these topics have been removed from the new syllabus. So you possibly can skip those MCQs when you're doing the yearly past papers before the March 2023 exam, right? So yeah, that's one change. Another change is that the limitations of the theory of comparative advantage have been added. It's basically written in the new syllabus, although in the previous syllabus it wasn't explicitly written. I didn't find it, however, but I personally used to cover that thing in my classes because I felt it's part of the topic, and so I would definitely suggest you that you do cover the limitations of the theory of comparative advantage. MCQs could possibly come, simple MCQ, not it is just a straightforward topic, right? So the disadvantages of the comparative advantage theory of David Ricardo, you guys must be aware of those limitations. Other changes that there's another trade protection method, which is voluntary export restraints, and they have been removed. They also have been removed from syllabus. They're not mentioned under the new syllabus, whatever the trade protection methods are, and it's not there. So possibly they will not ask you questions on voluntary export restraints, but it's a very simple concept. There's no harm in knowing it, right? I would still say that at least go through it once, although they will not ask you because it's not mentioned in the new syllabus. However, on a very personal note, in my experience, there have been times where Cambridge has tested things out of syllabus. So I would still suggest you that it's a very simple concept. There's no harm in knowing it. Okay. Now, some another changes were made in the topic of balance of payment, and what we need to know for MCQs is that the topic of financial account and capital account of the balance of payment, since we know that balance of payment has three components, that is three accounts: the current, the capital, and the financial account. So the financial and the capital account is basically now moved to the A2. So if you find MCQs specifically relating to capital and financial account, you could leave them because they will not be tested. However, I would still very strongly suggest you that being a student, you should still have knowledge on the financial and capital account because they will help you understand everything around and about and of the current account much better. So make sure that you have the knowledge on financial and the capital account. Okay. Now, moving forward, some other changes were made in the topic of exchange rate, and what we need to know for MCQs is that the following topics in the topic of exchange rate were actually moved to A2, such as the concepts of real exchange rate, the nominal exchange rate, the trade weighted exchange rate, the concept of purchasing power parity and the purchasing power parity exchange rate, the fixed exchange rate, even the fixed exchange rate, since we have three exchange rate regimes, the floating exchange rate, the fixed, and the managed floating exchange rate, they were also moved to A2. So all of these topics are moved to A2. So for example, if you find MCQs on maybe purchasing power parity or the purchasing power parity exchange rate or the trade weighted or nominal or real exchange rates, you could sort of ignore them and you could leave them because now they have been moved to A2. However, I would still very strongly suggest you that you should still have knowledge on fixed exchange rate and managed floating exchange rate because it will help you understand the floating exchange rate much better. Because MCQs could come like, why is floating exchange rate better? But you would only know the answer to why the floating exchange rate is better, properly when you are aware of how the fixed and managed floating exchange rate works, right? So I would definitely recommend you that you must have the knowledge on fixed exchange rate and managed floating exchange rate. Although a specific MCQ regarding in the name of fixed exchange rate or managed floating will not come since it has been moved to A2. Hopefully. Okay, some other changes have been made in the topic of exchange rate, such as the concept of devaluation and revaluation has been moved to A2 because obviously fixed exchange rates and managed floating exchange rates have been moved to A2, so they represent the concept of devaluation, and revaluation represent government intervention in the forex markets. So they have been moved to A2, right? The concept of Marshall-Lerner condition and the J curve has been moved to A2. However, I regret this decision of Cambridge to moving it to A2. It makes no sense. Also, the impact of changes in exchange rate on domestic economy and the external economy. Domestic economy, external economy. Okay, fine. So using the Marshall-Lerner condition and J curve. So for example, if the exchange rate is sort of let's say depreciating or appreciating, or there's devaluation or revaluation, and the impact that will bring on the domestic economy, as in the GDP, inflation, unemployment, and the external economy like the exports, imports, and the current account. Using the Marshall-Lerner condition and Jacob, as in how would the Marshall-Lerner condition actually impact the extent or the nature of that, you know, effect on the domestic and external economy, and then the subsequent diagrammatic representation via the J curve. So they have been sort of moved to A2. However, again, I will strongly suggest to still be aware of the concepts. You should still be very much aware of the concepts of devaluation, revaluation. Because why? Because knowing these will help you understand whatever is in the syllabus in a much better way. Although J curve and Marshall-Lerner condition have been moved to the A2 syllabus, they will be tested in A2 now. So there's a possibility, 100% chance or a 99.99.99% chance or 100% chance, hopefully, that they will not test you an MCQ on a Marshall-Lerner condition or the J curve. However, learning what the Marshall-Lerner condition is and what the J curve is will help you understand, whatever is in the syllabus in a much better way. Because you need to understand that the J curve is just a diagrammatic representation of the concept of, the PD for exports and imports being inelastic in the short run, causing the current account to sort of, deteriorate as the currency devalues before it sort of improves. So the economic concept is still there. However, the diagrammatic representation is not there. But you need to know this. I mean, there are certain things that you need to be aware of, even if they're not a part of the syllabus, because it helps you understand whatever is in the syllabus in a much better way. And remember, guys, it's my golden rule. This is my rule, and I always say in my classes. So if something is not in the syllabus, guys, but that thing helps you, remember, if it's not in the syllabus, but it helps you understand better whatever is in the syllabus, then you should acquire knowledge of it. This is my golden rule. I always recommend it to my students, and you should do it as well. Okay, some another changes were also made in the topic of macroeconomic policies. Now we know that policies is a very crucial topic as far as A levels is concerned, be it AS or A2, and these changes, although personally it doesn't make sense, but still let me tell you what these changes are so that it can help you, solve these MCQs. Okay, so as far as the changes are concerned, expenditure switching and reducing policies to correct a balance of payment disequilibrium have been moved to A2. They were first part of AS, and you might have seen plenty of MCQs with the name of specifically of expenditure switching and policies and reducing policies in AS. So now they will not test you MCQs on expenditure switching and reducing policies by the name of expenditure reducing and switching policies. However, now there's specifically some sort of confusion here which I really want to address, and you guys must honestly understand this very, very, very carefully. Although they will not test you an MCQ on expenditure switching and reducing policies, despite the fact that they will not test you a macroeconomic MCQ by the name of expenditure switching and reducing policies, they will test you an MCQ on the policies to correct an imbalance on current account, because current account is still part of your AS syllabus. Now, when you say that the current account, there's an imbalance on the current account, we are referring to an excessive deficit or an excessive surplus, and we want to sort of correct that excessive surplus and deficits. However, when we say that the balance of payment is in an excess, the overall BOP is in a deficit or a surplus, we use the word disequilibrium. We don't use the word imbalance for it. And since capital account, financial account have been removed, so in the syllabus they're only referring to the word imbalance on the current account, because obviously they can't use the word disequilibrium since that is used for the overall BOP, right? And since capital and financial is removed, so we can't refer to BOP here right now. But you need to understand that the policies to correct a BOP disequilibrium are exactly the same policies to correct an imbalance on the current account, because the policies to correct an imbalance on the current account include the supply side fiscal and monetary policies, right? And if you see what expenditure switching and reducing policies are, these policies are the same. I have a detailed video on expenditure switching and reducing policies on my YouTube channel, and you see that it includes fiscal, monetary, and supply side policies to correct a BOP disequilibrium, right? So I would still very strongly recommend you guys that while practicing, and I'm saying it again, while practicing your AS yearly MCQ papers, I strongly recommend you guys to still practice MCQs on expenditure reducing and switching policies, because conceptually they will conceptually, the crux of those MCQs is exactly the same as the topic that is mentioned over here, that is the policies to correct an imbalance on the current account, because those policies are the same, right? So make sure that you don't skip those MCQs, because attempting those MCQs, that is expenditure reducing and switching policy MCQs, I'm going to repeat it again, attempting expenditure reducing and switching policy MCQs will help you, attempt these MCQs in a much better way. Which MCQs? These MCQs that are, policies to correct a, current account imbalance. These MCQs in a much better way, and you will be well equipped to, sort of understand and attempt these MCQs if they come in an exam. So, despite the fact that MCQs with respect to expenditure, by the name of expenditure reducing and switching, might not come. Maybe they could just mention monetary, fiscal, or supply side policy, but technically these monetary, fiscal, and supply side policies are also, if these policies are if these policies are used to correct an imbalance on your current account, these are expenditure reducing and switching policies. So we don't really need to be so much strict and rigid with our learning methods and strategies that, okay, fine, it's not mentioned, so we will not do it. That's not the case, okay? Like I said, the golden rule is that if something is not in the syllabus, but that thing helps you understand better whatever is in the syllabus, then you do acquire knowledge of it, and you guys will practice MCQs for expenditure reducing and switching policies, and believe me, you will definitely be thanking me later, okay? So I hope, guys, you enjoyed this video. I'll see you all around in the next video. Until then, keep practicing MCQs and take care.